Hi guys. So I'm just a little bit late today and I apologize for that. Oop, about that. So sorry about that. So yeah, I don't know what's going on, but I had my laptop repaired a few weeks ago and I don't know, some settings were all messed up and I couldn't get into an interview that I had earlier today or anything. So hopefully you guys are still hanging out, still around. I was very tempted to just have you guys move over to Facebook. And I just had my husband trying to work on this because I figured at some point I have to figure out what's going on with the camera. So it's here. So hello everyone, if you stuck around. Let's see. I don't know if anybody's here. Well, I'm so sorry guys. Well, I will stay live for a little bit. I know I lost some of you. Is it Mikael? Is that how you pronounce it? Hi. So sorry I'm late. So I'm kind of half between like last week's time and then the time shift. I have a little bit of a cough. So, yeah, feel free to start in with your questions. So, oh, I did want to make sure that I announced today too that I do have 2 workshops coming up this week. They're online workshops on Thursday and on Sunday. They are both for fixing your register break. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how to fix that funky, clunky transition between your chest voice and your head voice, come check out that workshop, and you can find out more information about that at singwise.com/workshops, and you can register online there as well. Hi, Janet. Thanks for sticking around. Hi, Lisa and Sweet Peach. Oh, thank you. I'm actually in my basement because my kids were watching a movie, and I didn't really want to disturb them. They were like 3/4 of the way through the movie, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll just set up downstairs somewhere. So the lighting's probably a little funky here. I've got like a lamp and then a weird light above there. But anyway, hi. So yeah, yes, finally, I know. Sorry. So yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions. I'll make sure I put it on live chat, not hot chat. I'm going to poke here a little bit. Always works better when I use my fingers. Yeah, anybody have any questions today while I'm here? I'm spending a little bit of time. I don't know. So, yeah. Am I like as blurry as I look here in my window? Because I look pretty blurry. The lighting, I think, is just really bad. So sorry about that. Sweet Peach, I was wondering if you could help me with my breath technique. There's so many different types, and I'm not sure the one that's best for me. Absolutely. Actually, I think didn't Dr. Dan just post a video this past week, I think, on which breath management technique is best for you given your needs? And I apologize, I had this cough for like 6 days, and I feel fine, but it's like this annoying, persistent tickle in my throat. So, oh, hi, light skin. Oh, so nice to see you. So, I always have this love-hate relationship with the topic of breath management for singing. On one hand, I acknowledge that it's really critical for our being able to make healthy, sustainable sounds, and to make the kinds of sounds that we want to make. So it is important. But on the other hand, I feel like sometimes we unwittingly interfere with processes and coordinations that are just sort of intuitive for our bodies. And I do believe that in the vast majority of cases, our bodies just kind of figure it out when we get some other things kind of in place. Sometimes it's even just up here, just again, we kind of overthink, we overanalyze, we get that sort of analysis paralysis, which it sounds like you're kind of feeling a little bit of right now. So one of the things that I like to do, my favorite thing really, is to use a sustained V. And what you'll do is you'll just, so I can actually see where I am. So you're going to just put your hands underneath your ribs, just a little bit. You've got the bottom ribs right there, and you're going to put your hands right there, like little mittens in there. And you're going to just rev on this V. So the V is just the upper teeth touching the lower lips. And we're going to rev a little bit like a car engine, right? And more often than not, what will happen is these transverse and oblique muscles in here are the muscles that we will tend to feel engaging in order to support that tone, so to speak. And the reason why I use that V is because I feel like those are the muscles that just intuitively want to engage, as opposed to things like, the abdominis rectus muscles, which we tend to use for more forceful expulsion of air, more forceful expiration. So, excuse me, sorry. So, when we do that, that kind of cues our bodies to where and how we should be connecting with that lower body to be able to manage the breath more effectively. And then if we use that as kind of our guide, then what we can do is we can start trying other exercises on that sustained V. So we can try, your and what we will feel is those same muscles engaging. Now, they're not going to engage to the same extent as the like right when we're kind of being a little more forceful and revving the sound. But if we energize that exercise, whatever it might be, it could be scales, sirens, what have you, that will kind of tell us how our bodies want to support the tone, so to speak. And we get the benefit of it being a semi-occluded sound in which the airflow is partially obstructed. In this case, it's fairly obstructed. There's very little air that can pass through that tiny, tiny opening here. And so we get that nice positive back pressure behind that closure, and then the throat tends to open up. The vocal folds tend to square up so they're neither too thin nor too bulky. And then the breath kind of responds to that because now everything is those three parts of the voice system, the breath management system and the vocal fold vibration and the resonance, they're all kind of working in cooperation now, right? They're playing together really nicely. So I often have students sing vocal phrases on this sustained V and to get a feel of how things should be connecting here. And so they'll sing through the vocal phrase and then they'll repeat the vocal phrase, but now with the lyrics, or now with just a single vowel sound, for example. They might not sing the lyrics right away. And usually they're able to transfer that same coordination to their singing. And you can actually hear an instantaneous difference in their singing when they start to connect a little bit more intuitively with the body and the support. So when it comes to breath management, I mean, our bodies do, to some extent, know exactly what to do. And of course, singing places higher demands on us than speech, right? So, excuse me. So we have to enhance our breath management. There's no denying that, but it's still the same body. You know what I mean? It's still the same muscles, and we're still having to feed the vocal folds what they need, whether that's for a song or for speech. And so I think that sometimes just kind of taking out the analytical aspects of things and just kind of encouraging the body to do what it intuitively would do is sometimes the best way to approach things, whether that's for classical singing or for contemporary styles of singing. I think letting the body kind of tell us how it wants to do things without us interfering. The biggest part of interference, I mean, I think is really just what goes on in our heads, how we're thinking about singing, and we tend to hear a lot of people, like a lot of nervousness and a lot of kind of stressing out about certain aspects of singing, especially things like high notes and loud notes. And that's when I notice most of that interference, most of those unproductive helping behaviors, so to speak, when it comes to breath management. That's when the breath management tends to be a little bit off, is when we have these singing tasks that require a little bit more from us, and then we kind of panic a little bit. So don't overthink it, I guess, is the bottom line. Go to this V, rev a little bit just to feel those muscles engaging and to what extent, and then try some exercises on the V, whatever those exercises, those patterns might be. Excuse me. All right, I'm gonna move on to other questions. Hopefully that helps, Sweet Peach. Thank you so much for being patient, guys. I feel really bad. Jessica, hi. How could you explain how belting and twang should feel in your mouth head? I'm never sure if I'm so sorry, if I do it or not. Yeah, so So when I do twang, my mic always cuts out. I didn't set up my studio mic, my recording mic today. But so when I sing with a lot of twang, I definitely feel a sense of narrowness at the top part of the pharynx. It's actually a really important part of twang. So narrowing is not the same as constriction or squeezing. It's not an uncomfortable thing. It just feels like the vocal tract is just narrowing and making some adjustment to be able to augment those high frequencies that we get from twang. Um, and for me, I always describe it as kind of feeling like it's hooking kind of right in behind that alveolar ridge. Most of my students tend to feel it around that same area. They feel that buzziness kind of forward in the mouth space when we're producing twang. And when the pharynx is narrow, I think that's partly because we're feeling that sense of resonance a little bit more forward as opposed to in the throat as much. I know I tend to feel at my throat, even though I can feel that narrowing of the pharynx, it tends to feel pretty passive. I don't know if that really helps at all, but that's how I experience it. And the belting, belting to me is pretty much the same thing, but there are different aesthetics when it comes to belt. There are some belts that involve kind of more of a swallow reflex, like a g, g in the throat. Actually, Idina Menzel is a good example of somebody. If you listen to her in Wicked, you can hear some of her belt comes from that g, g kind of sound. And I was listening to Bandstand. I listen to Bandstand a lot. And Laura Osnes does this. And there's one song, and I can't remember what song. I think it's Love Will Come and Find Me Again. When she says again, every time she says that G, you can actually hear the g, g in the sound. And that's, engaging the tongue a little bit differently. And I know some teachers teach more of a high and back tongue approach with belt, which is going to feel different from a high and fronted tongue. I tend to employ more of a high fronted tongue, so it's more mixy twang. I sing a lot of musical theater. So I'll say that, like, in terms of like where it feels the mouth and the head, I feel like for the most part, most people report feeling it kind of in that frontal area, that like I feel a lot of buzz here, and I tend to feel a lot, again, behind the alveolar ridge in that area. And that's mostly just, where the pressure maxima is building up, because again, if my tongue is high and fronted, then there's, pressure that's going to be hitting that hard palate in a certain way, air pressure as it tries to pass through that narrow space between the tongue and the roof of the mouth. So that's how you're going to feel it. But then you hear, some belting from, pop and singers that have kind of a darker, huskier tone, and they're probably not feeling it in the same place. Like I don't have the same voice that they have, so I don't know if I can say that my experiences related to the sympathetic resonance associated with twang and belt are the same across as every singer across the board. But I bet you if you were to ask some singers who have kind of a darker sound, like when I do that, Melissa Cross exercise, excuse me, she sings the whoa, 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 where you're staying in that chest voice, you're kind of locking into that yell resonance coupling. When I feel that, as long as I kind of keep it from getting whoa, too far back, I still kind of feel it in that same area, even though you hear like the is darker than wah, how I sing a lot of my music. It's a little more fronted and bright. Excuse me, so annoying cough. So, I guess it depends. How you're going to feel things, where you're going to feel things is going to differ depending on how you're shaping your vocal instrument, how you're shaping your throat, and your how you're positioning your tongue and your mouth. So yeah, I don't know. For me, it's always kind of in that frontal space, and I think it is that way for a lot of singers, but not everybody necessarily. Robert Waddle, hello. Yes, I have a little cough apparently. Who is my favorite singer? Oh, my favorite singer changes all the time. So there are some voices that just kind of melt me a little bit. Like I love Chris Daughtry's voice. I think it is just like beautiful. Bryce Pinkerton has this like voice that's kind of like dreamy. So my favorite voices though tend to be like lyric baritones in general. But yeah, there are just different voices that I like Corey Cott, Bandstand. I'm kind of liking his voice these days. Laura Osnes' voice I'm obsessed with right now too. I love Carrie Hope Fletcher. I would love to steal her voice, to be honest with you, but I wouldn't do that because it'd be cruel. But yeah, I like Carrie Hope Fletcher. So she sings on the West End. She sings pop and stuff on her channel too. But there are lots of voices that I really like and that I aspire to learn something from, at least. Samuel, nice to see you. Hi, such a long time before I saw you live. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I had to do a bunch of resetting. All right. So I got my usual question for you first. How have you been lately? Oh, all right. Thank you. What have you learned lately? What music did you listen to lately? Oh, I kind of just answered that question. So I'm listening to a lot of Bandstand. Today I listened to Something Rotten because it takes me to my happy place. I listen to a lot of musicals these days and a lot of Kids Bop because I drive kids around all day. I'm the chauffeur. So what have I learned lately? Yeah, so I'm those are good questions. Those are really good questions. Yeah, I'm still working through kind of finding different types of mix and belt. Trying to, I mentioned earlier we have different aesthetics and trying to make those subtle shifts so that it gives me a little bit more color and a few more options on my artist's palette. That's what I'm working on right now. Is kind of build on the existing mix and belt that I have. Excuse me. Second question is going to be weird. Oh, sometimes I like weird questions. I know you're an awesome teacher, but I would like to know if you would have to choose a teacher from YouTube community of teachers. Who would it be? Oh, that's a good question. There is a teacher that I actually would like to study with, but she's not on YouTube. So that leaves me with, I don't know. I think, yeah. Evelyn Hollins might have. I think that I could learn something from a lot of teachers. Like I could learn something from Dr. Dan. I could learn something from, Evelyn Hollins. I could learn something from like Sophie Shear. I could learn a little bit. They all offer something different that I think I could learn from. Even like Carl Whedon, I could learn something from him, a little bit here and there, certain things that I think that they do really, really well. Areas that I would say that they're kind of more specialized in. Those are, yeah, kind of hard. That's a great question though. Sorry for the typos and mistakes. Don't worry about that. I'm so sorry about the cough, guys. This has been like 6 days and it's annoying. I feel perfectly fine, but it's like, I don't know if I inhaled some like cooking oil fumes or something. Sometimes I burn the oil. So, I'm not really a bad cook, but sometimes it happens where I get distracted. So, do you happen to have tips for high notes? Oh, and ever since my voice started to get deeper, my full head voice kind of disappeared completely at first, and is now not usable in a speaking range. Interesting. Sorry about my dog barking upstairs. Okay. So the tips for singing in head voice, I have a video on that topic, and a lot of it really comes down to not panicking at the thought of singing high notes. And it sounds really silly, but I think the number one thing that prevents singers from being able to sing comfortably and well up in the higher range is that fear of flying, so to speak, right? They're afraid to sing high. It could be because they've experienced vocal injury or pain or strain in the past. It could be that they just don't like the sound of their voices up there, because the fact of the matter is that we don't all start off sounding great up in the upper range. It's an area that we don't use on a regular basis, and it's an area of our technique that really needs to be developed. We need to work on it, and we need to spend a fair bit of time developing it. So the full head voice, there are so many different, I'd have to really hear what's going on, like where you're at right now to work on that. Like, are you talking more of like a mixy head voice, like a head mix, or are you talking more of a classical head voice? Because I think the approaches are somewhat different. To me, a mixed head voice is often a little more acoustically open, and more of a classical mix is that voce chiusa, right? That closed voice, which is, it's a different approach. I teach my students both because I think that there's a time and a place for both, especially even in contemporary singing. So I think learning to be able to ease into that. One of the things I was working on with a singer, she is a soprano, a lower soprano, and we were talking about whistle voice, and she's like, "Oh, I don't sing above A5 because she's getting a little older," and I'm like, "Why not?" And so we had this conversation, and she's just like, "I just don't like the sound of it, and it just sounds thin and weak and such as we get above that." And within a few minutes, I had her singing in whistle voice. Now, she wasn't intending to sing in whistle voice, so I had her singing up in the 6th octave, and we did it with like a going like meow, and just kind of squeaking out the highest noise that she could squeak out. And when you do that, that just gets the vocal folds stretched, and it damps them to be able to make that whistle sound. And then what happened was, as we came back down in the scale and we started singing around that A for her, was all of a sudden the A's were that much easier. And I think sometimes if you extend your range and you go beyond. All right, I don't know if I need to start a new live stream. There you go. So sorry. It said that my live streaming software just disconnected, so I don't know what happened. But yeah, so I think that we need to learn to be able to stretch the voice in both directions, but really exercise it, teach the vocal folds to be very supple and flexible, and that will really help a lot too. That will give us the confidence. If we can meow in the sixth octave, for example, that's going to give us more confidence to sing in the 5th octave. So, sorry, who asked the question here? Was it? Oh, that BTS fanboy. Okay. I'm so sorry about the cough. I hope you can understand this somehow. Yes. So, I think as far as things disappearing, I think what happens sometimes is we start to spend too much time on one part of our range, and we start to really focus on that, and then to the neglect of other parts of our ranges. So I always encourage singers, and my live stream keeps stopping, and I'm so sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. So we need to encourage ourselves to just sing in all parts of our range. I'm sorry, it's very distracting when everything stops. Sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on with my stream. Video output low. Well, it's still going, so I'm going to keep talking, and hopefully the sound at least works here. Let's see. Sweet Peach, thanks so much. Definitely take your advice. Oh, thank you so much. Light Skinoso. Are we still streaming? Oh my goodness, this is very frustrating. Does the uvula actually have a part in singing? Not really. Not really. The only thing that it does is because it's attached to that arch of tissues that is our soft palate, part of our soft palate, is that it will tend to go back as part of the mechanism of sealing off the velopharyngeal port, the nasal port. But if you actually were to stand in front of a mirror and sing an ah, you may see it going back a little bit, but you're not going to see it swinging completely back and horizontal, for example. It doesn't play a role in resonance. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it really has a significant role from what I understand. Robert, is singing hard for everybody, especially high notes, or is it just me because I have a slightly too deep habitual pitch? I think that for the most part, the vast majority of singers do struggle with the high range, just because, again, we don't use that in day-to-day speaking. I'm starting to wheeze. That's great. So, speaking low isn't necessarily going to prevent you from being able to develop an upper range, right? It's really more how you're using your voice to be able to stretch it. So I always say, if you're struggling in like the upper range, find something that works. So whether that is like lip rolls, tongue trills, those kinds of exercises, those help to thin the vocal folds, and they help to kind of ensure that the breath is working really effectively. And so that's one of the first things I will do in helping singers access the upper range, first of all, in a healthy way. We do lip rolls, tongue trills. They're good too, especially the tongue trills, because they occupy the tongue. So that tendency for us to engage the tongue root in an unproductive manner tends to kind of go away when we're doing those. Not always, but in the majority of cases it does. And I would say that high notes are, I mean, it depends on what you mean by hard, right? So is it hard in the sense that it's uncomfortable and painful and straining you? Or is it hard just that you don't like the sound? Or is it hard that you are not accessing the thinner edge function of the vocal folds? So there's that, the straw phonation, anything like that that helps the vocal folds find a better balance and helps the breath find a better balance, I think is really beneficial. So yeah, I mean, even if you're a lower voiced singer or you have a lower speaking pitch, I think you should still be able to access head voice comfortably and be skillful when you sing up there. It takes time, it takes some development. Oh goodness, it keeps stopping. I don't know what's going on. Oh, Corey and Laura, yes. Yes, musical theater. Yeah, they're both so good. Oh my gosh. Her voice is like, it's like cute, but in a good way. What was the song you mentioned? Love Will Come and Find Me Again was the song, Janet. It's just the whole CD is so good. It's so good. And she has several solos in there, but it's it's the story of this group that comes together. They're vets from the war, and she lost her husband, and they invite her to be the singer in their band. And so a lot of it is about them performing and writing songs together and stuff. And I'm going to sneeze in like a minute. Oh, goodness. All right. Hi, Karen. How are you? I am a lighter and baritone. I don't know if you heard my comment earlier, Nick. I love lyric baritones. And I'm wondering if, in your experience, does the male falsetto blend smoothly into their head or mix, or is that break in registration unavoidable? Yeah, you should be able to transition very smoothly between the registers, ideally, in an ideal situation, an ideal world. I feel like falsetto is different from like a head voice or head mix, right? The vocal folds generally aren't as together; they're much thinner. Oftentimes in falsetto, you've got that little gap, and a lot of the sound is through like almost like a whistly kind of tone. Not the same as whistle voice because they're still vibrating. But you've really lost a lot of the compression in the sound and a lot of the vocal weight, whereas head voice and head mix still have, some really good connectedness at the vocal fold level, which means that you're getting a stronger sound source signal and you're going to be accessing more of the higher overtones in the voice. So it's always going to be a fuller sound. So even though head voice and head mix are also M2, along with falsetto, there is a different coordination involved. The underlying coordination, the vibratory pattern of the vocal folds is the same or similar, but I say that falsetto is great to use as a start. I always tell students that even if you can't sing in a full voice above that passaggio area up into the M2 range, if you can access falsetto, we can start working with that. But falsetto in and of itself is not, it's not automatically going to transition or convert into a head voice or like a fuller voice up at the upper range. I think a lot of it, I'm going to be doing, I don't know if you heard my announcement earlier, Nick, but I have workshops coming up this week on Thursday and Sunday on fixing the register break, and you can just go to singwise.com/workshops to find out more about that and to register. And I'm going to be walking through different techniques, like identifying where our passaggi and our breaks are. Those are two different things in my book. And being able to feel where the voice just starts to make subtle adjustments. And that if we're not responsive to those adjustments, that's when we start getting a little stuck that's when we get breaks. That's when we get that flipping into falsetto instead of a nice smooth transition, a gradual transition into a full head voice. And there are so many different ways that we can do that. Again, we can do it in a more open voice way or in a more closed. I don't know if that answers really, but still world, you would be able to transition really smoothly. I don't think it has anything to do with voice type. I think that a lower voiced singer is, even if he struggles a little bit with the thinning of the vocal folds, and especially if it's a heavier weighted instrument, he should still ideally, after some training, some really, good practice, over time be able to make that transition into head voice very. All right. So sorry. I'm probably going to need to end this soon because it's just not working out very well today. But yeah, so the best way to do that is to bridge that gap between technical exercises and singing, and to apply that technique that you're doing is just to kind of do it in steps, to bring in a little bit of the sounds that you're working on. Let's say you're having trouble singing a certain note in the way that you want to, but you can sing that note just fine in a certain exercise. Go back to the exercise, put that note as the top, and then maybe go a little bit above that, and then come back down. And then your body will remember. It'll remember what to do because it's used to doing that in the context of the exercise. And then you reintroduce the lyrics and the vocal phrase, and then your body will start to remember what it's supposed to do. So that's the best way to do it, I think, is to kind of do these little intermediate steps between. Memoirs of an Imperfect Baritone. I love that name. Is tension under the chin only caused by the suprahyoid muscles, or can it also be caused by a tense tongue? All of the above. Can also be caused by just poor management of the breath, to the point where all the muscles of the system start to become stressed. It can also be caused by a head forward posture in particular. That's really common. I have a video on my channel on tension up underneath the chin, and I go through a series of stretches and exercises that you can use to help relieve that. Because oftentimes with a head forward posture, we're looking down at books and phones and computers and such all day. And these muscles become stressed and they become lengthened, while these muscles here become chronically shortened and tight. That includes these muscles, these suprahyoid muscles up underneath the chin. And those muscles will tend, when they're short and contracted like that, they will tend to yank up a little bit on the larynx because they're all connected to the hyoid bone, right? And the tongue also shares some muscular attachments, and these suprahyoid muscles, some of them are involved in the action of the tongue. So it's all this whole complex system that works together. So what we need to do is we need to check our alignment. We need to focus on our breath. We need to learn to be able to do a bunch of exercises that will release tensions, including the tongue. I've got several videos on, tongue root tension and that sort of thing. So it's just a whole complex of things that need to be addressed. It's not just that we have tension right here. It's not an isolated thing. Let's see. How to get a full warm tone? Well, it depends on what you mean by full. Do you mean like belty full, or do you just mean, louder? It's a little keeping the larynx a little more stable, a little lower, for example. That's gonna lower all the formants, and it's gonna create a warmer sound. How you shape your vowels, that's gonna make a difference in the warmth in your tone. So again, if you're dealing with like a really bright natural timbre and your tone tends toward brightness, then there are things that you can do that are not going to have you falsifying your timbre, because I think there's a certain inauthenticity that the listener does pick up on when somebody is using a voice that doesn't sound natural to them. So what you want to do is you want to kind of think of warmth in the context of your own individual instrument and build the warmth into the sound in very healthy, productive ways, ways that are going to work in your favor artistically and technically, as opposed to things like, flattening and retracting the tongue, which a lot of singers try to do to get that darker, warm sound. Let's see. I think my stream is frozen again, isn't it? All right. I'm so sorry, guys. Also, I always struggle with breathing during a song. I know the proper way to breathe, but it's difficult to maintain the technique during a song. So again, like I said earlier, if we take the exercises that we work on, so if you know how to sing during exercises, what have you, or you know how to breathe correctly with the exercises, go back to the exercises, and then do whatever it is that you do. Bring the exercise into that pitch range. Bring the exercise and take the exercise that you're doing and maybe um, sing the vocal phrase on a single vowel instead of bringing in the lyrics or something. Like there are ways that you can, again, take what you're doing in practice with exercises and vocal scales and such, and then transfer that over to the songs that you're singing just by kind of doing these intermediate steps. Um, it sometimes it's difficult because you have things like consonants that you don't always have in vocal exercises. So sometimes the consonants become a little obstructive of the airflow. Sometimes it's the emotion associated with the lyrics or what you're experiencing in response to the lyrics. Sometimes it's just that we almost like try too hard and we forget our technique when we're singing in some ways. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not so good. So yeah, I think again, just kind of easing into that instead of just kind of keeping those two things separate, the practice and the singing. Excuse me. Lena, Elise, hello. Sorry, I just jiggled us. How do you strengthen your head voice and create a better flow between your break, between your chest and head voice? So again, I have that workshop that we're going to go through a lot of this stuff then. Excuse me. But I think it depends on the sound that you're going for. So if you're going for a classical head voice, for example, I would approach that somewhat differently. And I would really work on learning to be able to create the depth in the sound, stabilizing the larynx through the upper passaggio. Learning